Hey guys, good morning or good afternoon. I wanted to go ahead and begin reading you the chapter of our read aloud. Our book is going to be Woods Runner. I'm not sure if that's mirrored to you guys or not, but it's by Gary Paulson and it's called Woods Runner. The setting of the story is the late 1700s. Now, my fifth graders in social studies, you guys are a lot further than this. So we're going to travel back in time. Fourth graders, we just talked about the French and Indian War and how that caused debt on the British. And so they began kind of quarreling over ways to raise money. So even for you guys, we're going to fast forward a little bit into the American Revolution to where the Britons from the Old World were kind of in combat with the American colonies. So that's where we are. This book is about a 13-year-old named Samuel, and Samuel lives in the colony of Pennsylvania. And he feels like the war is far away from him, but eventually it comes to his home. So we're going to read about how it affects his family and what he does in response to that. The way this is going to work is I'm going to read you a chapter and then I'm going to ask you a question or a kind of thought to ponder at the end. You can respond to that on a piece of paper, or I will make a sheet in Google Classroom for you to jot your response down each day. Don't turn that in to me until we're finished with the book, okay? Just keep your thoughts going and I'll set it out for you by chapter so you'll see. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start reading about Samuel in the Woods Runner. He was not sure exactly when he became a child of the forest. One day it seemed he was 11 and playing in the dirt around a cabin or helping with chores, and the next he was 13, carrying a .40 caliber Pennsylvania flintlock rifle, wearing smocked buckskin clothing and moccasins, moving through the woods like a knife through water while he tracked deer to bring home to the cabin for meat. He sat now by a game trail waiting for the deer he knew would come soon. He had heard it, a branch brushing a hairy side, a twig cracking, smelled it when the wind blew toward him, the musk and urine of a buck. He checked the priming on his rifle when he waited, his mind and body relaxed, patient, ears and eyes and nose alert, quiet, every part of him at rest, yet focused and intense. And he pictured his life, how he lived in the two worlds. Sometimes Samuel thought that a line dividing those worlds went right through their cabin. To the west, beyond the small parchment window made of grease-soaked sheepskin scraped paper thin, lay the forest. The forest was unimaginably vast, impenetrable, mysterious, and dark. His father had told him that a man could walk west for a month, walk as fast as he could, and never see the sun. So high and dense was the canopy of leaves. So when you look out of his house in one area, it's just forest, and it's so thick that they can't even see sunlight because of the canopy of the tops of the trees. It's just, there's so many trees that sunlight can't break through. Even close to their homestead, 12 acres clawed out of the timber with a small log cabin and a lean-to for a barn. The forest was so thick that in the summer, Samuel could not see more than 10 or 15 yards into it. Some oak and elm and maple trees were 4 and 5 feet in diameter. 4 and 5 feet in diameter. That's like thick, like the trunk thick. 4 and 5 feet. I'm about 5'3". So you can think these trees are huge. A wild world. And while there were trails made by game and sometimes used by natives, settlers, or trappers, the paths wandered and meandered so that they were impossible to use in any sensible way, except to hunt. When he first started going into the forest, Samuel went only a short distance. That first time, though, he was well armed with his light Pennsylvania rifle and dry powder and a good knife. He instantly felt that he was in an alien world. An alien world. As a human, he did not belong. It was a world that did not care about man any more than it cared about dirt. or grass, or leaves. That sounds pretty sad. He did not get lost that first time because he'd marked trees with his knife as he walked so he could find his way out. But still, in some way, he felt lost, as if, were he not careful, a part of him would disappear and never return, gone to the wilderness. Samuel had heard stories of that happening to some men. They entered the forest to hunt or trap or look for new land to settle and simply vanished. What do you think happened to them? Simply vanished when they walked into the woods. Gone to the woods, people said of them. Some, he knew, were dead, killed by accident, or panthers, or bears, or Indians. He had seen such bodies. One, a man mauled to death by a bear that had attacked his horse while the man was plowing. The man's head was eating. Another, killed by an arrow through the throat. Oh my goodness, that's terrible. An arrow Samuel knew that came out of the woods from a bow that was never seen, shot by a man who was never known. And when he was small, safe inside the cabin near the mud brick fireplace with his mother and father, he had heard the panthers scream. They sounded like women gone mad. Oh, he knew the forest could kill. Once, sitting by the fire, a distant relative, a shirt-tail uncle who was a very old man of nearly 50 named Ishmael, had looked over his shoulder as if expecting to see monsters and said, "Nothing dies of old age in a forest. Not bugs, not deer, not bear nor panthers, nor man. Live long enough, be slow enough, get old enough, something eats you. Everything kills." Let's talk about that for a second. Nothing dies of old age in the forest. All right, let's think about people. If they die of old age, what does that mean? That means that they lived a long time, that nothing super bad or deathly happened to them, right? That they just died because they lived old enough for their body to give out on them. So if his uncle is telling him nothing dies of old age, that means that something deathly or traumatic happens to them, and that's how people die in the forest. Ooh, kind of scary. And yet Samuel loved the forest now. He knew the smells and sounds and images like he knew his own mind, his own yard. Each time he had entered, he'd gone farther, learned more, marked more trees with his knife, until he always knew where he was. Now he thought of the deep forest as his home, as much as their cabin. But some men vanished for other reasons too, because the forest pulled them and the wild would not let them go. 3 years ago, when Samuel was 10, he had seen one of these men, a man who moved like smoke, his rifle a part of his arm, a tomahawk through his belt next to a slab-bladed knife, eyes that saw all things, ears that heard all things. One family in the settlement had a room on their cabin that was a kind of stone. The man had come to the store to buy small bits of cloth and powder and English flints for his rifle. At the same time, Samuel was waiting for his mother to buy thread. The man smelled of deep forest, of smoke and blood and grease and something green. Samuel knew he smelled that way too. The stranger could not be still. As he stood waiting, he moved. Though he was courteous and nodded to people, as soon as he had the supplies for his rifle and some salt, he left. He was there one moment and gone the next, into the trees, gliding on soft moccasins to become part of the forest. As much as any tree or leaf or animal, he went west. Away from man, away from the buildings and the settled land. Now Samuel heard a new sound. He moved his eyes slowly to the left without turning his head, and was rewarded by seeing a tick-infested rabbit sitting by a tree, trying to clear the insects out of his ears. Samuel smiled. Even in dead of winter, the rabbits were always trying to rid themselves of the pest. The sight that made him think of his mother, who was intensely curious and had once asked him to take her into the forest. They had not gone far, not over 500 yards from the edge of the clearing, and had stopped under a towering oak where sunlight could not get through. There was a subdued green light over everything. Even their faces looked a little gentle green. "I have to go back," she said, her eyes wide, wrapping a shawl tightly around her shoulders, though it was summer warm. "This is too thick." Even the air is green, so thick it feels like it could be cut. Oh, I have to go back now. Although Samuel's parents lived in the wilderness, they were not a part of it. They'd been raised in towns and had been educated in schools where they'd been taught to read and write and play musical instruments. They moved west when Samuel was a baby so that they could devote themselves to a quiet life of hard physical work and contemplation. They loved the woods, but they did not understand them, not like Samuel. They had told their son that they didn't belong in towns either. They weren't comfortable in the world of roads, houses, and villages. Each of their imaginary line in the cabin was what his father and mother called civilization. They told Samuel about the chaos of towns that they'd escaped. There were noises, hammers clanging at blacksmith forges, chickens clucking, dogs barking, cows lowing, horses whinnying and whickering, people who always seemed to need to be talking to one another. There wasn't noise in the forest. All right, guys, my video is getting kind of long. I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to record a new one. So when you're watching this, you should watch the first video and then look for the second one on Google Classroom.